Hello, guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Skills and Abilities. Last episode, we took a look at the Druid skill Twister, and that was an interesting one. Today, we're going to be looking at the big brother to the Twister ability, which is known as Tornado. Similarly to Twister's physical damage aspect, Tornado is also a physical damage ability. In fact, if you take a look at it on the skill tree or the character panel, you will notice that it is written in white, whereas Hurricane is written in blue. This is indicating that Tornado is a physical damage attack. Now, unfortunately, Tornado is not affected by some of the more interesting things that physical damage are affected by. Like, for instance, you cannot use Life Tap on Tornado. You cannot use Might or Concentration or Fanaticism on Tornado. It is governed by Faster Cast, just the same way that Twister is. And the interesting thing about Tornado is that it is, however, affected by Amplify Damage and Decrepify that reduce the physical resistance of the monster. So you can get a nice benefit by having a form of Amplify or Decrepify on you. Like, for instance, if you have a mercenary who is running a Reaper's Toll and is dishing out Decrepify, the physical damage aspect of your Tornado is going to be increased. Tornado is a very interesting ability because it does a pretty nice amount of damage. It can be cast relatively quickly, and honestly, it dishes out a lot of hurt. But it does have its issues, and I feel like we need to go over the issues with Tornado and talk about what you can do to potentially overcome them. So the first thing that I want you to see here is a straight line. So as you can see, we are in Arcane Sanctuary. Here is a nice straight line, and I'm going to try and cast my Tornado right here. Notice the Tornado does not go anywhere near where you want it to cast. Now I'm going to try and cast my Tornado over here. Oh, look, it did go where I needed it to go. Now I'm going to try and cast it over here. And in this way, what you are going to notice is that Tornado does not behave at all. It goes kind of where it wants to go, and for the most part, it is extremely difficult to control exactly where you would like it to be, especially when you have a monster. So let's say we want to attack this specific monster. We cast our Tornado on it, and what happens? It doesn't go anywhere near where the Tornado should go. In fact, it even seemed to almost deliberately go around him. So what can you do? Well, Tornado is more accurate the closer you are, obviously, because it always comes out in front of you. So one thing that you can do is you can attack relatively close to the monster, and this will, of course, enable to make sure that hits. But as you can see, this monster is physically immune, so we are kind of in arrears. We can't really do anything to prevent this monster from blocking us, except for using another ability. So Hurricane, which is the companion of Twister, does cold damage, and you'll notice something about Hurricane is that it is a relatively close range ability. The radius of Hurricane barely goes in this little zone right here. I would consider that melee range. There are weapons that can attack from that far away, like the War Pike, which basically means that you're kind of relegated to a melee posture. And this is one of the things about Tornado that is actually kind of interesting, because as you use it, you will notice that you have to get close anyway to make Hurricane work, and you have to get close anyway to make Tornado work. So it just kind of makes sense. So basically, you're just kind of running around getting within melee range. As soon as you are within melee range, you'll cast your Tornadoes, and hopefully your Tornadoes will bless you with some form of cohesive movement. The further away the target is, of course, the more difficult it is to hit the target with the Tornadoes. And it really takes a nice combination of effects. You really need your Hurricane running. You need to make sure that you're close enough so your Hurricane is dishing out damage. If you can't deal any damage to them physically, you can always spam your Twister ability, which will put them into a stun lock, which is also very interesting. And here we go. We have a monster that is immune to physical and is immune to cold damage. Now, this is something that I've come across before. Immune to physical and immune to colds are very deadly for this particular type of build, because obviously you don't have any other element. Hurricane is basically just cold damage. Tornado is physical. Twister is physical. Or even Arctic Blast is cold damage. And so basically you're left in a situation where you need some other form. Now, if I did have decrepify or amplify damage, I could break this resistance. It wouldn't be the greatest, but I would eventually be able to kill this particular monster. But as it is right now, I don't have any way to get past this guy. Now, I do also have some other items that allow me to cast tornadoes while in my bear mode. There are items that are called chance to cast items, and they do have some very interesting effects. Stormlash Scourge is a 20% chance to cast level 18 tornado on striking. I also have a Storm Chaser Scumptum, which is probably not the best shield, but it's 4% chance to cast level 5 tornado when struck. And you can utilize these while you are in bear form, and you can dish out some pretty significant punishment in this way. And what you do is you cast your Hurricane just like you would as a Hurricane Druid, and you basically utilize the chance to hit to get these nice effects. As you can see, I can spawn some tornadoes, I spawn twisters, I have all sorts of interesting things I can do. And these twisters are getting the synergy bonuses from, the tornadoes are getting the synergy bonuses as well from my my building of these skills. And it's actually a pretty cool way to build a character, just so you can get a interesting effect. And only one socket, look at that. That's worth like 35k easy though. I'm gonna bring that back to town. Now, there's really not a lot to say about this particular ability. I went over this ability earlier, and I actually messed up the video, but that's okay. I can make another one. Mr. NiNi bit me in the middle of the video, which I'm telling on him now. I'm telling on you, Mr. NiNi. I'm telling on you. He's rude. He wasn't actually trying to bite me. He was just trying to dig in my shirt, because apparently my shirt is his house, and yeah. And he doesn't realize that his house is also a living, breathing human. He looked away. Good. That means he knows he was wrong, or does he? He probably doesn't, actually, now that I think about it. So Tornado is definitely a nice skill to have as a Hurricane Druid. It doesn't really have much use outside of being a Hurricane Druid. Unlike Twister, which we went over recently, which has some very interesting uses outside being a Hurricane Druid, it doesn't really quite work that way. Twister has a stun effect on it, it hits multiple times, and there are multiple armors and items that can proc Twisters, and a good reason to do so. However, Tornado is mainly about damage, and if you're not fully invested into the Hurricane tree, it just doesn't really make a lot of sense to have those proccing items. Whereas the Twister doesn't really require you to be invested in the Hurricane tree. In fact, even items like the Carrion Wind can be extremely useful for non-druids, because they can also benefit from the 0.4 stun duration, which helps out a ton against a lot of various monsters in the game. However, Tornado really doesn't have anything except for damage. And if we were to take, for instance, the level 18 Tornado on striking, which is on Stormlash, how much damage does a level 18 Tornado do unsynergized? Well, that is roughly about 251 to 273 physical damage, and of course physical damage is relatively highly resisted in hell difficulty, so you're probably looking at an average of 50% resistance. So without any kind of amplify damage or decrepify to beef that up, you're probably looking at more like 125 damage from that effect. Doesn't really seem very worth it, does it? And without any kind of additional effect like Twister, it just doesn't really have a good reason for you to use it unless you, like me, have a fully synergized version. It does, however, work really well in tandem with the other abilities. If you're using Hurricane, if you are using Tornado, if you're using Twister, if you're using Cyclone Armor, all of these work extremely well together, and that is literally called the Hurricane Druid. As for the rest of this, you can potentially build a Hurricane Druid with some other effects. Like, for instance, you could put in some Ravens and some Spirit Wolves and things like that to help you out. In fact, I usually recommend putting Ravens into most builds, even just 5 of them for the blinding effects, because they do actually get pretty good use if you can blind targets and make them relatively useless while you murder them with the rest of your abilities. I think that's pretty much it for Twister. And as always, I do appreciate you guys and gals. Or sorry, Tornado. I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos. And as always, keep watching.